A new case of Zika found in San Diego County. What makes this case different from all the rest?
And I could talk for hours about yeast, or in 5 minutes you could try the different yeast strains and go, oh, I see what they do. I see how important this is.
The king of craft brewing in San Diego comes in a tiny package, a closer look at the organism that has a big impact on the industry. It's just a jump to the left and then a step to the right as we go behind the boas and the fishnets to see what makes everyone return again and again to the time warp. This is Evening Edition on KPBS. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. San Diego County health officials say there's been a local case where the Zika virus has been transmitted sexually. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says it's the first case of its kind in the region.
Health officials say a woman contracted the disease after having intimate contact with a man who recently took a trip to Colombia. Officials suspect the man was infected by a mosquito bite in that country. Health department officials say both people have recovered from the mild symptoms they came down with as a result of the infection. Now, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control confirmed the case with laboratory testing this week. The CDC says pregnant women should not be traveling to regions where the virus is common because the illness increases chances of defects in unborn babies. County health official Wilma Wooten says people exposed to the virus should also be careful about conceiving.
If you get infected, don't try to conceive for 8 weeks from the onset of symptoms for women and 6 months from the onset of symptoms for men. And if you do during that period, make sure that you use the appropriate protection, like the use of condoms.
And that's because the disease is suspected of causing microcephaly. That's when a newborn has a smaller head and brain than normal. Symptoms linked to the disease are relatively mild. They include fever, rash, joint pain, and conjunctivitis. There have been no recorded instances of mosquito transmission of the Zika virus in the United States. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
U.S. District Judge Janice Zammartino said it was truly unimaginable that a high-ranking Navy captain would sell classified military information to a foreign defense contractor. Captain Daniel Disick was sentenced today to 46 months in federal prison, a sentence 2 months longer than the prosecution recommended. He was convicted of selling ship and submarine schedules to Glenn Defense Marine Asia. In exchange, he received personal favors and gifts. Assistant District Attorney Mark Pletcher says he hopes this serves as a message of general deterrence.
That internationally, as our soldiers and our sailors continue to sail into foreign ports, that we underscore with these cases the ethics and the values that this country was founded on.
Disick is also ordered to pay a $70,000 fine. So far, 10 people have been charged in the scheme. 9 have pleaded guilty. Disick was ordered to report for custody on June 15th. The American Civil Liberties Union says U.S. border agents have been denying food to asylum seekers who wait for many hours to get processed. In a letter to Customs and Border Protection, the ACLU says a disabled transgender Mexican woman was denied food for over 30 hours at the San Ysidro port of entry last week.
This is a space where officers should have sensitivity training and have additional requirements placed on them for dealing with individuals who have trauma in a way that's very respectful and humane.
The letter asks the border agency for a formal apology. Customs and Border Protection has not responded to our requests for comment. California's wet season is beginning to wind down. Has El Nino put a dent in the drought? Let's check the KPBS drought tracker with science reporter David Wagner.
California's statewide precipitation has been just about average. That's according to data compiled by climate researchers at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. As of Friday morning, the KPBS drought tracker pegs statewide rainfall at 108% of normal for this wet season. The average Sierra snowpack measurement is just below the seasonal average at 93% of normal. But Scripps researcher Dan Cahan says rain and snow have been unevenly distributed throughout the state.
Conditions in Southern California have been drier than average, but the water supply rich areas of California actually have been wet.
In Northern California, the state's two largest reservoirs, Shasta and Lake Oroville, are now above their historical average levels. Still, the drought is far from over, and today looks nothing like California's last major El Niño in 1998, when both rain and snow exceeded 150% of normal. To see the latest numbers for yourself, go to kpbs.org/drought tracker. David Wagner, KPBS News.
California beaches are shrinking. Federal, state, and local agencies have spent decades adding sand, but experts say there are few long-term options. A state assembly committee examined the problem last week. UC Santa Cruz professor Gary Griggs says in the short term, removing old dams and dredging sand can slow some erosion. He also says in the long term, the beaches are trapped between a rising ocean and human development along the coastline. A sad sight on Torrey Pines State Beach. A young gray whale carcass was removed this morning after it washed onto the shore. A skip loader lifted the dead animal, which was between 18 to 25 feet long. A federal biologist says the whale appears to have been about 2 years old and propeller marks were found on the body. She also says it's not known whether the whale was hit by a ship before or after she died. A new PPIC poll shows Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump leading in the presidential polls in the state, but analysts say a lot can change in the next few months. California is not a winner-take-all state. It's divided into 53 congressional districts, and each district has 3 delegates, which makes California a delegate gold mine. Analysts say because of the way California votes, there will be 53 mini political campaigns in each of the congressional districts rather than one big statewide campaign.
And if you look at those statewide polls, neither Trump nor Clinton has really what you call a runaway lead in California. I mean, it's not really that impressive when you look at it. It's after at this stage of the game, you would think if they were really on the way to victory, they would have a stronger vote. But there's obviously a lot of sentiment in the Democratic Party for Bernie Sanders.
On the Republican side, Ted Cruz has already set up camp in California in anticipation of a tough political battle, but Trump has yet to mobilize his forces here. If the California primary becomes pivotal, it will be the first time in decades that it plays such a significant role in a presidential election. Waiting for a tax refund? Officials say some Californians may have to wait longer than usual. That's because the state tax board will be holding on to some refunds for a few extra days to combat fraud.
It's frustrating to have your refund delayed, but it's definitely not as frustrating if we sent that money to a fraudster, because in those cases it could take months or even years to get that resolved.
Right here, number 9.
The delays for filing online could be up to 2 months. The delays for paper filing up to 4 months. To check your tax return status, visit ftb.ca.gov. San Diego County's Transportation Planning Agency is inching closer to asking voters for a half-cent sales tax increase. SANDAG board members met today to discuss what that tax money would pay for. The big question is how much money will go to public transit. Some board members say they need more funding for highways and local roads if the tax hike has any hope of getting the 2/3 majority it would need to pass. That was the theory behind the county's Transnet tax, first approved by voters in 1987. But others say future growth will not be based on the car.
As a region matures, it changes. All of you know this. And what we're seeing and what you're going to see, a Transnet 20 years from now is probably going to be very heavy in public transit.
SANDAG staffers are now preparing a survey of voters to see whether the tax hike is feasible. The board has 2 weeks to decide whether to put the tax on the November ballot. Remember the Volkswagen diesel emissions scandal? Well, now a U.S. District Court judge has given the car company a 1-month extension to come up with a plan to fix their mistake. The company already missed the first deadline yesterday to present a plan to bring more than 600,000 cars into compliance with clean air laws. If no agreement is reached by April 21st, a trial will be held this summer. Environmental health advocates are crying foul after California opted to delay a requirement for toxic chemical warnings. Bisphenol A is a toxic chemical that causes harm to a woman's reproductive system. The food industry needed to label BPA as a reproductive toxicant after Prop 65 passed. That was supposed to happen by May. Now, the state is asking for an emergency extension that'll put off the labeling rules for at least 6 months. Critics call that ridiculous. The Center for Environmental Health says the food industry doesn't need more time to adjust.
We think there's absolutely no basis for an emergency in this case. This simply doesn't fit any definition of an emergency situation. So the Office of Administrative Law should deny this ruling by the Cal EPA, and we're hoping that's what they'll do.
A decision on the exemption could come next month. These are heady days for the San Diego craft brewing industry. The region boasts nearly 120 breweries, and there are plans in the works for even more. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says many share a common connection, which helped create San Diego's craft beer hub.
So we're going to go in the analytical laboratory. This is where we do a lot of testing on the beers for alcohol levels and flavor compounds. It's a real chemistry lab.
This lab room is part of the home base for White Labs. The San Diego company is one of the largest yeast sellers in the country. Owner Chris White says yeast is crucial for making beer.
Most people would know that it makes the alcohol. Yeast consume the sugars from the malted barley. The brewers extract those sugars out, and then yeast consume those sugars and produce ethanol.
Yeast also makes those little bubbles that drift up a cold glass of beer. And White says yeast creates flavor. That's one reason for the White Labs testing room. It features identical beers made with different yeast strains.
And I could talk for hours about yeast, or in 5 minutes you can try the different yeast strains and go, oh, I see what they do. I see how important this is.
White holds a biochemistry PhD, and he started cooking up beer with his friends in San Diego 20 years ago. Some of them just sold their Ballast Point brewery for $1 billion.
In 2009, I don't think any of us saw it coming, but in 2009, the industry really started taking off because consumers started noticing. Before then, it was the real kind of beer geeks that were paying attention.
Those beer geeks laid the foundation for an industry that's doubled in size in just the past 5 years, and White Labs had a major role in that success. Small or large, White Lab yeast can be found in beer made at every brewery in the region.
They drive over here, pick it up from will call, and go home so they can use different strains every day, every week they want to. So it allows a lot of different beer styles to be brewed because each yeast strain is really important in the different beer styles. And if something goes wrong with the beers, they can bring it here. We have a lab that can do a lot of analytical analysis.
Local brewers didn't have to rely on a small vial of yeast shipped from out of town. White Labs made batch-sized quantities of high-quality yeast. The local access is invaluable for a craft beer industry that is bent on perfecting San Diego-specific beers.
We're doing something where we can touch it, feel it, smell it, drink it, if you will. In doing so, that allows us to kind of expound and do things in a quicker fashion and also a larger fashion.
Mother Earth isn't the largest beer maker in the county, but the firm is in the top 10, according to the San Diego Business Journal. Hopkins says the brewery got there because it made a good product that found a receptive audience. And Mother Earth can replicate that brew, vat after vat, batch after batch.
Craft brewing is extremely meticulous. It's akin to baking, which is I think the most structured of the cooking disciplines, if you will. It's time, temperature, and recipe driven. You have to do it right every single time or the end result is going to be different. That starts with the quality of goods that you start out with.
Hopkins says brewers do develop their own yeast, but large-scale production is exponentially easier when they can focus on cooking. And the craft beer cluster has cooked up a pretty big economic footprint. A study from the National University System Institute for Policy Research measured that footprint at $600 million. The industry created 5,000 local jobs. And the San Diego Business Journal says more than half of the locally produced craft beer on its annual list of biggest brewers is sold outside the region.
White Labs is the linchpin for
the craft beer industry here in San Diego being a industry cluster.
National University's Vince Vasquez says the region fermented a passion for brewing and had plenty of customers willing to try innovative products. White Labs has been there for 20 years, priming the pump.
It's knowledge transfer. It's this real organic process of what I do and what you can learn from what I do and seeing what I do. And that's something that's really unique to the San Diego craft brewing region.
Vasquez says 12% of all the beer consumed in the nation is craft beer. That percentage climbs to 35 to 40% in San Diego County. Even mega brewers like Anheuser-Busch and SAB Miller are buying or opening craft beer places here.
I think certainly there's a lot more room to run when it comes to the craft breweries opening, craft brew pubs. That being said, I think San Diego does continue to have these higher expectations of those newer brewers and brew pubs that are opening have to meet or have to exceed.
San Diego's craft brewing hub rose in prominence in large part because of the presence of White Labs, but the local craft beer industry only represents a small slice of the company's business. White Labs sells yeast nationally, and it boasts international offices in Denmark and Hong Kong. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
6 cheetah cubs make their debut at the San Diego Zoo. The cubs were born last fall, but finally went on exhibit in the safari park this week. There are 4 girls and 2 boys, and experts classify the cheetah population as vulnerable. The safari park is one of 9 facilities working to build a sustainable cheetah population and prevent the extinction of the world's fastest land animal. It may be time to break out your sweater soon. Cooler temperatures seem to be on tap for San Diego. Steph Davis says there is a small chance of rain next week. That's on tonight's KPBS Weather Report.
Happy Friday, everyone, and it's shaping up to be a fairly pleasant Friday weather-wise across much of the West Coast. Satellite and radar showing largely dry conditions with clouds breaking for sunshine from California all the way towards Nevada and the Four Corners area. Taking a closer look around San Diego itself, you'll notice mainly clear skies thanks to a ridge of high pressure in control, and we will enjoy this quiet weather pattern as we head into our Friday night. Dry and comfortable in Borrego Springs, your low is 52 degrees. Temperatures in Mount Laguna back to the mid-30s. 43 tonight in Alpine, upper 30s for Ramona, 48 and partly cloudy in Oceanside, and a pleasant night for San Diego with an overnight low of 59 degrees. So if you're heading out for your Friday night to kick off your weekend, should be good to go. The weather definitely cooperating. Lovely conditions as we look ahead to our Saturday. Again, high pressure in control, allowing for a quiet forecast with pleasant conditions all across Southern California. Here's a look at those details in your 5-day outlook for the coastal areas. Fog lifting for sunshine Saturday with a high of 70 degrees, 68 and sunny for your Sunday. Now we could see an afternoon shower or 2 on Monday and still the possibility for a couple of stray showers Tuesday and Wednesday. Temperatures will cool off with daytime highs only in the low 60s. Saturday inland looks beautiful as we kick off the weekend, mostly sunny and comfortable. Your daytime high is 71 degrees and a nice wrap up to the weekend Sunday with plenty of bright sunshine. Sunny and nice for your Monday, cooler, high 66, and then we do have the chance for showers Tuesday afternoon and into your Wednesday for the inland region. 5-day outlook for the mountains looks good for the weekend as well. Sunny and pleasant Saturday and Sunday, remaining dry for the weekend with daytime highs in the mid-60s. Cooling things off quite a bit on Monday with a high of 55 degrees and then much cooler Tuesday and Wednesday. Your daytime high for Tuesday, 46 degrees. Snow showers possible Wednesday with a high of only 47. Wrapping things up with your 5-day outlook for the deserts, warm with sunshine Saturday and Sunday as temperatures take off to the mid-80s. Much more comfortable for your Monday. Your high is 78 degrees. Cooling things down quite a bit Tuesday, high 68. Wednesday in the desert looks good, sunny and cooler with your high at 70. Steph Davis, KPBS News.
Hi, Mr. Hanford is making me breakfast.
Because breakfast is a very important meal.
The man who served porridge, songs, and wisdom on Sesame Street has died. David Smurl was best known for his work as Mr. Hanford, who took care of Muppets, kids, and adults at Hooper's store. He was 80 years old.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. From terror in Brussels to talk of torture on the campaign trail. Shields and Brooks analyze a full week of news. That's Friday on the PBS NewsHour.
Comic book and science fiction lovers have kicked off WonderCon. The 3-day gathering switched locations from Anaheim to the Los Angeles Convention Center this year. It features panel discussions, author signings, and other activities. The conference drew some 60,000 attendees last year. The event is being viewed as a tryout for Los Angeles to potentially lure Comic-Con away from San Diego. And that's music from Bright Star, a bluegrass-driven musical written by Steve Martin and Edie Brickell. It premiered in San Diego's The Old Globe 2 years ago, and last night the show made its Broadway debut, receiving mostly positive reviews. This isn't the first Old Globe show to head to Broadway. Several popular shows like Into the Woods and A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder also started out in San Diego. And more than 2 decades ago, Sean Murray put on a corset and fishnets to play Dr. Frankenfurter in the San Diego Rep, and now he directs a new production of the Rocky Horror Show at Signet Theater. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando does the time warp with this cult favorite.
Time is fleeting, and it seems like only yesterday the Rocky Horror Picture Show was introducing us to the time warp and to Tim Curry as a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. The film created a cult following in the 1970s that's persisted until today, with fans still performing shadowcasts at film screenings. The film's sexually liberating message appealed to the young Sean Murray.
My young, impressionable teenage self that went to the Strand Theater and saw Rocky Horror was moved very much by that message. As a young kid in high school, and high school is all about trying to figure out where you fit in, and here this movie experience basically gave me permission to not care and just be who you are and don't try to fit in with all the gangs and cliques or whatever.
Then in 1991, Murray played Dr. Frankenfurter in the San Diego Rep's production of the Rocky Horror Show.
It was one of the most fun things I've ever done on stage. The interaction with the audience is fun, the show is fun. Every ounce of ham in my body is allowed to be indulged, which is great.
Now Murray's reaching for the boa again for a production he's directing at Signet Theater.
Ooh, I see you shiver with anticipation.
But he says don't expect it to be exactly like the movie.
It will be completely different. In a movie, if you yell something, the movie stays the same. But on stage, we can not only hear you, we can see you, and we will fight back. I mean, the thing is it's a participatory show. The audience is a character in the show, a bit of an unruly character that you can never predict. And so it's a bit like riding a bucking bronco.
He also wants to return the play to its humble theatrical origins, which began in a 64-seat theater.
The excitement of the original production in that little tiny space, and that there's a garage band, cheap, low-budget element to the show that I think is essential to the spirit of the show.
What's also essential is the iconic character of Dr. Frankenfurter.
We want to honor the icon of the show, honor the icon of Frankenfurter. So you start with what people expect.
I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania.
And then you try to look at how can you then evolve that icon into your own statement and still honor the original idea behind it.
Murray says his production is all about how glam rock killed the malt shop rock of the 50s. That means Frankenfurter uses his androgynous sexuality as a challenge to the repressed Brad and Janet and to the audience.
I'm just a sweet transvestite.
I love doing Sweet Transvestite because it's so confrontational, and Frank has to be so completely unapologetic. So there's a fun, liberating kind of thing about that.
Why don't you stay for the night?
What I love about performing the floor show is the themes in the show. Ultimately, the play becomes about, if you don't really try to live up to who you are, if you always try to be what other people want you to be, you're always going to be chasing something and you're never going to be happy. Don't dream it. Be it.
And it's a message that audiences have been responding to for 4 decades. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Don't dream it. Be it. There you go.
And the Rocky Horror Show runs through May 1st at the Signet Theater in Old Town, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show still runs on select weekends with a shadow cast at the Ken Cinema and La Paloma Theater. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. From all of us here at KPBS, thanks for watching and have a great evening.